Enigma. Enigma. One of Batman's bad guys that were introduced in the 1940s. And someone who, whenever he's committing a crime, reveals a riddle. Batman can solve it, apparently not very well. Then he has a good chance of solving the crime. How's everybody doing today? You enjoyed Gotham? It's been a good series for you? Good. Well, I thought January would be nice and fun to try something new. Who's been in the Batcave? Anybody? I tried to crawl in and there were 15 kids in there at one point, so I didn't get much of a chance, but welcome. All right, let's see how smart we are here. I'm going to try a couple of riddles on you, okay? Poor people have it. Rich people need it. If you eat it, you die. What is it? Helicopter. Poor people have it. Rich people need it. If you eat it, you die. What is it? Nothing. Good. There you go. We got Batman over here. I don't want to say you're Batman, but you and Batman have never been seen in the same place twice, right? Or together in the same place. I'm tall when I'm young, and I'm short when I'm old. What am I? Candle. Who's that one? Really? If it was Rick that said that, I would say you're smarter than you look, but I won't say that to you. Okay. Mary's father has 5 daughters, Nana, Nini, and No. What's the 5th daughter's name? Mary. Good. A trick, eh? If I drink, I die. If I eat, I am fine. What am I? If I drink, I die. If I eat, I am fine. What am I? Fire. Good.
Sorry.
This is moving on to the "you're freaking me out" stage here a little bit. Just saying. Remind me never to try to pull the wool over her eyes. Okay. What occurs once a minute, twice in a moment, and never once in 1,000 years? M. Good. Okay. You guys are smarter than you look. That's great. If I have it, I don't share it. If I share it, I don't have it. What is it? If I have it, I don't share it. If I share it, I don't have it. What is it? Skittles? Someone over here have one? Nope. If I have it, I don't share it. If I share it, I don't have it. What is it? A secret. All right? Take away my first letter, and I still sound the same. Take away my last letter, I still sound the same. If I take away my letter in the middle, I still sound the same. I am a 5-letter word. What am I? That's a tough one. The word empty. You take away the first letter, it sounds the same. Take away the last letter, it sounds the same. Take away the middle letter, it still sounds the same. One more. A house has 4 walls. All of the walls are facing south, and a bear is circling the house. What color is the bear? White. Good. North Pole. Good. Well, that was my sermon. Thank you for being here, and I'll just ask you to pass it on. When we were wrapping up this series, I want to talk about a character, the Riddler, and I want to talk about a character from the Bible who uses a riddle to good effect and to bad effect at the same time. Good effect because it interacts with God's plan. To bad effect because the individual who uses it misuses it and ends up paying a price for it. And so I want to walk you through one of the most interesting characters and one of the most interesting interactions in the whole Old Testament. The man's name was Samson. Samson, as a kid growing up, Samson was cool. I thought David was cool. I thought Samson was cool. David, because he was a great warrior. Samson, because he was a superhero in my mind. Anybody who can take 1,000 people on and win is a superhero. And when I was a kid, you may not have guessed this, but I really like superheroes. Actually, now I've grown up, I really like superheroes. Samson, his power that God gave him was strength. Incredible strength. And the feats that he committed were absolutely Superman in scope. Just to give you an example, there's one point, it's not in the account today, but there's one point where there was a city where they were trying to trap him, and he went at night and he lifted the gates off the hinges and carried them up the side of a hill and left them there. The gates on this city, it was a very well fortified city. The weight of the gates was anywhere between 2 and 5 tons. Okay? And he picked them up one at a time, carried them uphill on a hill, and left them there. This is how strong Samson was. Okay? So this guy is no slouch. Where Samson was weak is another area of his life that he tended to be quite juvenile in, and we're going to talk about it today, and we're going to break it down. I want to focus in on a verse from Proverbs that we were covering a few weeks ago at our young adults group, and it is this: let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. Let those with understanding receive guidance by exploring the meaning of these proverbs and parables. This is a writer of the Proverbs. He's going to give a number of sayings, a number of accounts, some advice, and he's saying, unfold these riddles. They will give you guidance and long life. So these proverbs and parables, the words of the wise and their riddles. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. As I was telling you last week, behind every precept there's a principle. Behind every principle there is a person. When you are reading a law or you are reading a instruction from the Bible, if you look at it on the one layer, just as a precept, it is cold and lifeless and seems restrictive. But you have to understand, behind every precept, there's a principle. So the principle is a wider range idea behind that precept, the reason the precept exists, and behind the principle is a person, God himself. Like laws in Canada, we as Canadians have a number of things about ourselves that we value, that are social mores that you may not even think much about. One of them is this: for the most part, when we come to a red light, we stop. When we come to a green light, we drive on. A lot of times we don't even slow down. A lot of times we don't even look left or right, which we probably should do, okay? And that's the precept. You do not, at a red light you stop, and a green light you go, right? Well, there's a principle behind that. The principle behind that is we want our roads safe. We want to be able to give way so that we can all operate our vehicles without harm or damage, and we want to be able to go through it. So the principle is safety and having an orderly and a well-oiled machine as our society. The person behind it is the idea of we're Canadians. We Canadians love our laws, and we obey our laws so that everybody can benefit. Now, behind the precept is a principle. Behind the principle is a person. There are countries in the world where a red light won't stop anybody, and a green light won't stop anybody. They're very unsafe to drive in. And some of you have been to those countries, right? But in Canadian society, we embrace that law to the fullest, to our detriment if we don't. Well, the Bible's the same way. A lot of times if you look at the 10 Commandments, or if you look at an instruction that God asks us to obey, you look at it as cold, hard facts, and you go, it's hard. Why is God trying to restrict me? I feel trapped, all those kind of things. But if you understand, behind the precept is a principle, and behind the principle is a person, the commandments mean entirely different things. I don't mean in that they don't mean what they say. I mean that there's so much of a fuller idea. Take, for instance, I was talking last week about the 10th commandment, you shall not covet. This is a law that is almost impossible to enforce. How can you tell people not to want other people's stuff? How do you tell? How can you tell if somebody's wanting somebody else's stuff? But this commandment, the commandment makes no sense if you don't understand the principle behind it, is that God is generous, and that God is content, and God gives us what he gives us, and to be content in him is to receive it and to believe in it. And behind that precept and that principle is a person, God himself, who is good and gracious and doesn't take things from other people. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Okay. In the Bible, when it says in Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is a foundation of wisdom, what he's saying is he's bypassing the principle and the precept, and he's going right to the person. Fear God, young men. Fear God, young women. Embrace him. Embrace him as a person. Then the precepts and the principles make sense. If you take a precept apart from a principle and a person, it doesn't make sense. It is cold, hard law. And nobody likes to be in a society where there's cold, hard law. Okay? But if you take it in its fullness, it means more. And this will have a lot of application in today. So I'm going to read from Judges chapter 14, an account of Samson. This is early in his life. The first chapter, Samson lives in a world where the Israelites have been tormented and oppressed by a people known as the Philistines. The Philistines are Phoenician, and one of the reasons the Philistines were such a tough people, they were the inventors of bronze. Okay, a lot of people fought with iron weapons, basically stuff that you melted down, took from the ground. It was soft, it bent easily, it didn't cut well. Bronze was a much tougher metal, and the people that discovered bronze had a better weapon. So if you were to take an iron sword and you were to chop against a bronze sword, the bronze sword would win. It was lighter, it was easier to use, and the Philistines had bronze armor, and they used bronze weapons, spearheads and arrowheads and their swords, and this made them the superpower of their world. And unfortunately, Israel lived right next to them. The Philistines were based around 5 principal cities. So we're kind of like 5 city-states. There was a king of each one, and they all kind of interconnected and depended on each other and formed alliances. And the Jews lived right next to them, and unfortunately the tribe that lived the closest to the Philistines in this account was the tribe of Dan. Now, we don't know a whole lot of Danites in the Bible. There's a few of them that are noted, but the most popular of them is Samson. Samson lived within spitting distance of the border of the Philistines. So regularly, the Philistines would come over to where Samson would live, his people, and they would oppress him. They would steal their crops. They would do whatever they wanted because they were superpower and the Israelites were the have-nots. Samson grew up in this world. He grew up, his mother was told that she was going to have a child, he was going to grow up, and he was going to be the deliverer. His name was Samson. And the instructions were, you are to raise him as a Nazirite. The Nazirite idea in the Jewish world was a young man who went by principles, who was considered a holy man. Not a priest, but a holy man. And there were 3 identifiable facts of Nazirites. The first is this: they were never to cut their hair. The second was this: they never drank wine, which was unusual in that culture. It was water or wine. That's what you had. Most people drank wine with their meals. But he was never to drink wine. And the third one, he was never to touch a dead body. They were to be kept pure and holy. And so Samson grew up as a Nazirite in this culture of oppression. Okay? So here he is. He's a young man. He's probably 17, 18 years old. He travels over to Timnah, which is beside the Israelite area, and I'll just read starting Judges 14. One day when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. When he returned home, as told his father and his mother, a young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me. His father and mother objected. Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all the Israelites you could marry? They asked, why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife? But Samson told his father, get her for me. She looks good to me. I have a feeling that Samson grew up somewhat indulged. Okay? Probably a little spoiled, probably a little entitled. Okay? Now, in that culture, parents picked your spouse. It was a day of arranged marriages. And his parents would have been right within their rights. In fact, a more common response to a request like this was, well, isn't that nice, sweetheart? You go to your room, and when we're ready for you to get married, we'll find you a nice girl. It was impossible for Samson to marry this girl or to even be approached unless his parents did it for him. But his parents don't show a lot of spine here, okay? And they determine what Samson wants, Samson's going to get. Now, I want you to understand, as an oppressed people, this would be very expensive, okay, possibility here. Probably his father had to put forward a certain amount of money in order to make this happen. There had to be a bribe in place, okay? So this doesn't come at a small price, and it goes against the culture of the time. His father and his mother didn't realize that the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at the time. As Samson and his parents were going down to Timnah, a young lion suddenly attacked Samson near the vineyards of Timnah. At that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he ripped the lion's jaws apart with his bare hands. He did it as easily as if it were a young goat. But he didn't tell his father and mother. about it. And when Samson arrived at Timnah, he talked to the woman and was very pleased with her. Lions, as you probably well know, are big. A lot of people don't realize how large they are until you get up close to one, maybe at a zoo or something. They are big. The largest lion recorded on history weighed over 700 pounds and from nose to tail was 11 feet. That's pretty monstrous, okay? Lions also have a jaw and a paw kind of death ray. Like their jaws can crush, probably go right through a log. Okay, that's how tightly they bite. And their claws, they can rake you and they can go in about 3 or 4 inches into your skin. So they are a fearsome creature. Now, this is a young lion, so he's, not a full-grown lion. So let's say he's probably about 300 pounds, but he was young and tough. And one of these attacks Samson. What does he do? He grabs its jaws and just rips it apart. Okay? Isn't that a beautiful visual? Aren't you glad you came to church today? He goes and meets a woman, and I have a feeling that when they talked, he didn't really listen to much of what she was saying. I think he was just looking at her and going, sweet. Later, when he returned to Timnah for the wedding, he turned off the path and looked at the carcass of the lion. And he found that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. He scooped some of the honey into his hands and ate it along the way. He also gave some to his father and his mother, and they ate it. But he didn't tell them he'd taken the honey from a carcass of the lion. Why wouldn't he tell them he took it from the carcass of a lion?
It's gross.
It's gross. B, it's dead. What's a Nazirite never to do? Never touch a dead body, right? Included animals. Samson is going to play light with the Nazirite rules, eventually to his undoing. As his father was making final arrangements for the marriage, Samson threw a party at Timnah, as was the custom of the elite young men. And when the bride's parents saw him, they selected 30 young men from the town to be his companions. Okay? So you got a picture. A wedding in those days, they did weddings right. They were about a week to 2 weeks long. It was an endless party. Okay? It just went on and on and on. Basically, the whole town shut down. Everybody would celebrate. A wedding was a big deal, okay? Even in Philistine territory, apparently. And so this is a long experience. And so a lot of things happen at weddings. Sometimes fights would break out. Actually, that happens at weddings today. Fights would break out. Dares would make. People would tell stories of their prowess and their exploits as warriors. There was a lot of bragging. There was a lot of carrying on. There was a lot of advice to the groom and the bride. There was a lot of laughter and jokes and all those kind of things. So Samson, being wise in the world the way he was not, gets up and he says to them, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you solve my riddle during these 7 days of the celebration, I will give you 30 fine pieces of fine linen robes and 30 sets of festive clothing. But if you can solve it, then you must give me 30 fine linen robes and 30 sets of festive clothing." So he makes a bet against the entire wedding party. Okay? So he's taking them on himself. And you got to look. They're looking at him. This guy who you conquered their people. Boy, he must think he wears pretty big boots here. So here's a riddle. All right, let's hear your riddle. So he said, "Out of the one who eats came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." Now, Samson has him at a disadvantage here. In Hebrew, the word for lion and honey are almost identical. Just one accent point is all that separates the two words. So to your average Jew listening to this, they would immediately think lion and honey because the words are in the riddle. They're hidden, but they're in plain sight as well. So you understand? So just as my riddles that I was giving you earlier were solved easily by some people, if you were Hebrew and you heard this riddle, you would have understood it quite plainly. But the Philistines do not have this advantage, and he probably would have given it to them in their tongue. And it would have been a foreign riddle. It would have been one that's hard to figure out. Now, they probably could have gone to the nearest group of Jews and said, "Hey, how would you solve this riddle?" I say, "Oh, it's a honey and lion. That's what it is," because the words are the same. And they'd be talking about the play words. But these guys are pretty proud, and they don't want to go to the Jews to find out about it. They want to solve the riddle. 3 days later, they're still trying to figure it out. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband to explain the riddle for us, or we will burn down your father's house with you in it." Talk about an offer you can't refuse. Did you invite us at this party just to make us poor? Come on, your family got us into this. You're going to get us out. So Samson's wife came to him in tears and said, "You don't love me, you hate me. You have given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." Okay? So the manipulation begins. I'll tell you one thing for sure. I don't think Samson was in love with her. Samson replied, "I haven't even given the answer to my father or mother. Why should I tell you?" So she cried whenever she was with him and kept it up for the rest of the celebration. Okay, we're talking about 4 days of unhappy woman. Okay? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Okay? And she is scorned. Okay? So she puts the gears on. Now you got to remember, this is a guy that a few weeks earlier had ripped a lion apart with his bare hands. Okay? But for whatever reason, she wears him down. At last, on the 7th day, he told her the answer because she was tormenting him with her nagging. And then she explained the riddle to the young man. He finally wore down, and he gave it away. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town came to Samson with their answer. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson is not amused. Listen to his answer. Samson replied, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved my riddle." Samson realizes that revealing the answer to her was as good as revealing the answer to them. And he's rather put off about it. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Okay, you got to admit, this is an aggressive, entitled, stuck-up, arrogant, prissy little brat. What happens? God works through him. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and powerfully upon him. And he went down to the town of Ashkelon and killed 30 men and took their belongings and gave their clothing to the men who had solved his riddle. He goes to one of the neighboring cities. Ashkelon, the Phoenician city of Ashkelon, was really a fortified city. The Phoenicians had discovered a methodology where you angled the rocks into the foundation and into the walls of the city to such an extent that it was impenetrable. In fact, the design was so good, the Romans who came afterwards used the identical design, and right up to the 1800s, many European castle builders used the same design. Because the way it was formulated, when you pushed against the rocks, it just stood up stronger. So here's Samson. He goes into this city that's incredibly fortified, where everybody feels good and they don't lock their doors or whatever, finds the nearest 30 guys, beats them up, takes their clothes, and leaves. I wonder how that would make the Philistines feel at this time. He went back. Okay. And he gave their clothing to the men who had solved his riddle. But Samson was furious about what happened, so he went back home to live with his father and his mother. So his wife was given in marriage to the man who had been Samson's best man at the wedding. You imagine this? Gave it to the best man. Now, what a great, great account. Samson's so mad, he calls off the wedding and everything. This is the 7th night. This is the closing deal. That night, he would have been married permanently. What does he do? He gets them their clothes and abandons the whole thing and goes home to live with his mother and his father and pouts. Okay? And there we find Samson. So what can we learn from this? Just a couple of things. First of all, I've got my cell number up there. If you want to text a question at any point, I'll take them at the end. So if you've got a question you want to ask around this. But I've got just a couple of takeouts, and there are tons from this message. It really is. But I'll just go to a few of them. First one is this. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you do know that just ain't so. Mark Twain. It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Right? What does this mean? What is Mark Twain talking about? Michael? Oh, who has a mic? Scotty, you got a mic? Okay. Bring the mic to Mike.
That was fire. There's lots of times that we think we know stuff. We don't really bother to check it. We're just sure we know.
Yeah.
And we think, well, this is true. It's always been true. My dad told me it was true.
Yeah.
I believe it. I know it.
Yeah.
But you're wrong.
Yeah.
And it gets you in trouble. And it bites you in the butt.
Exactly. Anybody else?
Are you sure about that,
was
Michael?
Yeah, you sure? He knows.
My wife said so, so it must be true.
Anything? Anybody add to that? Okay. This is. Oh, back to Quinton.
I think there's a sort of a lack of humbleness in that statement there. If you're proud, that sounds like that person who thinks he knows something but actually doesn't, or he even thinks he knows, and that's how proud he is.
Yeah. And I like the parallel he makes. It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. And you know what? We often think, I don't know something that got me into trouble. And it happens a lot, right? But he says the real trouble in life is when somebody is absolutely dogmatic about something that isn't true. Okay? When they're absolutely dogmatic about something that isn't true. As we are seeing in our world, people are walking into hotels and resorts and embassies and things, mowing down innocent people, men, women, and children, and blowing them up. And we call them fundamentalists and fanatics, which they are. Okay? But they go into that with the conviction that what they are doing is absolutely right. That it is right to kill men, women, and children, innocent bystanders, to achieve whatever is their religious, political, or fundamentalist view. Okay? But the rest of the world, most people look upon that and are horrified, as we rightly should be. There's something wrong about killing innocent people that most of us look at, in fact, a majority of the world look at and go, it just ain't so. Okay? Often people who become settled on something, and can I give you a couple examples? Because this happens inside religious organizations and outside. Every once in a while, I'll run into a Christian who has a hobby horse about some theological view that they take to such an extreme that they basically write off 98% of Christendom. Okay? One fellow, I remember, he was really interested in science and was very interested in creationism, which I believe in. I believe God created the heavens and the earth. The thing is he got so into this, it was all he ever talked about, it was all he ever wanted to do, and got to an extent where he said, if someone's coming to Jesus, it's as important they know my view on creationism and they believe it as it is them believing Jesus, which just ain't so. Okay? Just ain't so. So he became so dogmatic about it. And some Christians have their hobby horses. Some of them it's some theological view or whatever. In Christendom, we have and we identify what we call orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is what we believe is true to all people in all places in all times in all circumstances. Okay? We identify them as orthodoxy. A view of orthodoxy, the Trinity. A view of orthodoxy, the divinity of Jesus Christ, the virgin birth, the physical resurrection of Jesus. These are parts of orthodoxy, okay? And they are all cornerstones and viewed as significant and the center or the middle of our faith in Jesus Christ. We believe they apply to all people. And if you go into a Catholic church, you go into a lot of Protestant churches, you go into most churches, we all believe those type of orthodox things. They are what we call hills we will die on. But much more of Christianity is based on convictions. Okay? They're based on convictions of how we apply orthodoxy in living out our lives for Jesus Christ. Now, there are some things that are absolutely true and are timeless in our scripture and all those kind of things, okay? But some people take some of those views. In fact, Paul addressed a group of people in the city of Corinth who half the church believed one thing, half the church believed the other. There used to be in Corinth, people would sacrifice animals to idols. It was a very, very idolatrous culture as well as a, sex-starved culture. And you could go to the market afterwards and you could buy meat that was either just produced in order to sell at the market, or cheaper, you could buy meat that had been sacrificed to an idol. Because its function had finished, they then took the meat and sold it in the market at a discount. So most of the people in Corinth, instead of going superstore, went to No Frills and picked up meat from the food sacrificed to idols. Half the Christians in the church in Corinth freaked out about this because they said, what good is it? These were sacrificed to idols. This meat is contaminated because it was used for these godless rites. We should only buy meat that was slain for that purpose. The other half of the church were like, you know what? They believe in idols that don't even exist. If I can save $5 on a lump of meat, I'm going to do it. I don't care. And so they had this huge battle in this church over it, and people weren't talking to other people and all these kind of things. And I love Paul's response. He said, look, to you on this side, okay? These are your brothers and sisters in Christ. Do you really want to make it a point of contention for them that you identify this meat and you feed it to them and place it in front of them? Is that really worth tanking your Christianity on? Is that a loving, grace-filled thing to do? And he said to these people, they're right. That meat doesn't mean anything. They're sacrificed to idols and gods that don't even exist. So it's not as big a deal. So if you are isolating your brothers and sisters who do, you're allowing your convictions to separate us from Jesus and create broken relationship, which is completely contradictory to the gospel. The gospel is about bringing Jesus and people together. It's not about dividing us. So he said, you are actually hating these people and you are ostracizing them because of something as meaningless as this. So he told them both, what is the law of love? So he said, you guys, if you have some of the people that are, amped up on this, if you serve it before them, and it's been food sacrificed to idols, don't tell them. Or better yet, just buy the better meat, okay, for them. It's worth it. The law of love makes it worth it. And you people who are so uptight about this, yeah, you look uptight. You're not struggling with that. These are your brothers and sisters in Christ. And what they believe is not going to send them to hell as much as you would like to think it would. So love them, in spite of what they may have as their convictions. Those are convictions. Those are the kind of things. I remember a couple coming to me one time, and they were talking about Halloween, and they had kids, and they're trying to figure out what to do with Halloween. Because one grew up in a home where Halloween was the devil's night. And there was no going out, and there was no dressing up, and they would turn out their lights at night, and nobody was coming by, and probably regularly got their house egged or soaped. And, they didn't want anything to do with it. The other family didn't give a rip about Halloween. They thought free candy, it's a pretty good deal. They enjoyed dressing up. They got dressed up. They had a blast. They watched a scary movie, and they went around trick-or-treating. So they said to me, how can we hold our marriage together with these two contradictory views? He wants to take the kids out trick-or-treating. I want to run for the hills. I said, well, you've got to start with this one point. I said, you're both right. I said, you're both right. There really isn't a right or wrong answer to this. What you need to do as loving couple, look at your partner and say, okay, this is what your family did, this is what your family, but we're a new family. So what are we going to do? How can we love the other and sacrifice in such a way? And so they kind of came up with, okay, we're okay with certain kinds of costumes, and maybe going out for candy isn't such a bad thing, but we stay away from the satanic stuff and all the scary, spooky stuff. And the other one gave way in that, okay, we can do this once a year and we'll make it fun and, fun for the kids, but we're going to explain to them too the significance of, loving Jesus and how that contradicts that. And there's some of this stuff you should stay away with. And they found a happy medium, and I'm glad to say they're married to this day. I'm not saying they would come apart over Halloween, but there's a lot of views like this. Samson sees this girl, he identifies her, he has to have her, he makes it the absolutely only right answer. And it ends up landing him in hot water. He tells them a riddle thinking they will never solve it. It lands him into hot water. This dogmatic view that Samson has, where what he feels is right because he feels it. In 1600, a man named Samuel Rutherford was scheduled to be executed for writing something. Up to that time in Europe and most of the world was ruled by what was known as Rex Lex. Basically, the king was law. So if you had a king over your people, that leader, whatever he determined was important was law, Rex Lex. And so if you had a dispute that just couldn't be solved, you appealed to the king, and the king would decide. And if the king one week decided that wearing a ponytail was bad, everybody stopped wearing ponytails. If the next week he thought everybody should shave their heads, everybody shaved their heads. This was how rules happened. And it didn't actually work very well from time to time when you had a loopy king. Okay? But this is how the world was ruled. Samuel Rutherford wrote a paper, and it was called Lex Rex. And he proposed a change. He said there should be laws that rule the land that even the king is subject to. They were on their way to kill him when he died of natural causes. Talk about great timing. Okay? And from 1600 into the 20th century, society has been ruled by Lex Rex. We are ruled by our laws. Much of Canadian society is ruled by our laws. And so we look to law. This is why you had the Age of Reason. This is why you had a lot of people breaking things down. This is why a lot of people say, is God real? Well, let him prove it to me. Let me see a miracle. Let me see this. They're using reason because they believe only what exists is something I can see, hear, touch, smell, taste. Okay, that comes out of that Lex Rex world. We can write down and we can reason everything. But halfway through the 20th century, there became a switch in society. We went from Lex Rex to what I call modus rex. Modus rex is my emotion is king. Think about how many movies you see where a person has this horrible dilemma, and what is the advice they get from their father, their mother, their friend, their priest? What is the thing? Pardon me? No, it sounds like that, but no. What is your heart telling you? You ever hear that in a movie? Probably heard it about 1,000,000 times. What is your heart telling you? What your heart tells you is right. Can I let you in on something? If I did everything that came into my heart, I would be in jail. And so would you. Is it true? Right? But we live in a world where we believe our heart is king. Samson is a wonderful example of how many of us think. I'm amazed at the major life choices people will make in this world right now based on what they want in their hearts. And the heart is broken and corrupt. Okay? I'm not saying you're bad, wormy people. God died for you. Jesus died for you. You're worth something. You're worth an inestimable amount. But here's the thing. If the only thing you're going to use to determine right and from wrong is your heart, if you don't end up in jail, you're going to end up alone. Absolutely. Because we have a tendency to be selfish. Samson is a perfect epitome. We can look at him and go, wow. If it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you do know that just ain't so. Second one, the devil's in the details. God's people see the big picture. We see Samson. We see the tragedy of what's happening, unfolding. We see the pattern he's in his life, which I'll refer to in a moment. And we look at him and we think, what a sad story. You know, his parents should have said no. Samson should have known better. Samson shouldn't have given them a riddle. Samson shouldn't have had to kill people. You know, the Philistines, all this kind of thing. But there's something going on in the big picture here that is far more significant. Why is it God pops up right in the middle of this twice? One when a lion approaches, and one when Samson needs to go get some clothes. Why does God intervene? Because God is working the chess pieces in a far bigger picture. And many people die purposeless lives full of regret because they do not embrace this idea that there is a higher purpose, a higher story, a higher plan that's going on here. You were not placed in this world to grow up, get a career, make lots of money, and then retire to Florida where you can blow out your aorta in Sarasota. Okay? You are here for a higher purpose. You are here to serve a higher God. You have a higher purpose. If all you're here to do is to make a living and begin to continue to propagate the series, we may as well all commit suicide after we've had kids. And I know a lot of you feel like it. Right? There's a higher purpose going on here. I'm going to get letters about this, aren't I? All right, third one. Observe Samson's pattern and learn to break yours. Part of the thing about modus rex, determinism in our society, we think that because our heart feels something so strongly, we engage in it, we do it, we think that we have no choice. What happens when someone we catch something doing something wrong, what is our first response? What do people do? You got the mic, Scotty? Okay, what do people do when you catch them at something bad? What is their first response? Pardon me? Denial, yeah. That's good. Nancy? Justifying. Yeah, we make excuses, right? Why do we do that? You've been listening to a lot of politicians lately, haven't you? Can't be my fault. Yeah. Was it a provincial, without getting political, but the provincial governor had made a promise that one of the reporters pegged them on this week. And they said, you said this was a goal and you were to accomplish it. And the response was, this isn't a goal, this is a stretch goal. Did you hear that? What the heck's a stretch goal? Apparently a stretch goal is we had a goal, but it was a stretch. So we meant it, but we didn't really mean it. It was kind of pie in the sky, but we really wanted to do it, but we're not apologetic because it wasn't a goal, it was a stretch goal. Give me a break. There you have modus rex. Modus rex is when we're caught at something, we make excuses. And you know some of the excuses we come up with are absolutely ridiculous. They look ridiculous to everybody else. To us, they're justified. Well, you know, I wouldn't have done that if she didn't do this, and she talked to me this way, and my mother did this to me. And you know what? I'll tell you something. I see it as a pastor. I'll see two people grown up in incredibly hard circumstances. One of them's a saint, the other is the devil himself. And you look at it, and you go, they both had incredibly hard lives. Why is it this one's a saint, and this one is like, wow. Beyond Thunderdome. Because you do have a choice. You can't in your own strength. You need God's strength. You need strength from other believers. You need to embrace Christ in that. But as I've told you before, and I will say again, I grew up the son of someone who came from a very dysfunctional, very promiscuous, very broken, sinful life, who accepted Jesus at the end of his life, but who left a very poor legacy of what it meant to be a father to me. Who his father was an abusive, hard-drinking man who also left horrible consequences. There's all these things that were passed down father to father to father. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, I determined I will break that chain. Just because my father did it, I'm not going to do it. Okay? Is it easy? No, because it tends to be naturally you do what you know, right? But it is possible to overcome it. One of the things I'm so proud of my sisters for, I've got 4 sisters. They're weird, but they're my sisters, so I gotta love them. But I always joke my father wanted all sons, but instead he got those 4 losers. All of them. No, my mother downloads this. I'm sure she's going to show it to them all. She does. She downloads all my messages. Sorry, Mom, it just slipped out. It's not my fault. I just, you know, if you hadn't raised me this way, this would have come out. All of them, without a strong father figure, dated or lived with, and one of them even married a real jerk. I don't know where they found these guys. I mean, they were tools. They really were. Okay? But all 4 of them learned from that experience and are today married to the 4 most sensitive, loving, solid, hardworking people. Like, these guys get together and I'm sitting around from them and think, man, you're not a Christian, but you're witnessing to me, man. They're just such solid, loyal, caring people. And they married my sisters. Got to be like Jesus if you live with my sister. Okay? They broke the chain of abuse. You can too. It's not easy. It's a long roll. It's a war of attrition rather than an instant battle. But with Jesus, you can too. Break the chain. Samson is stuck in a circle of his own choosing, and it will eventually lead to his destruction. but not before God works through him. And if there's something we can learn from him, don't make the same mistake. And I encourage you to continue to read about Samson in the weeks to come. We start a series called Better next week. I want to take just a few moments for questions or comments. And if we can, I'd like the baskets to go around. There's outies and then innies. The outies are the ones you take stuff out of. The innies are the ones you put stuff in. Inside are offering envelopes and response cards. If you're our guest here today, don't feel obligated to give anything. But what we would love to do is put you on our email list so you can receive updates on what's happening in KCC. We have a lot of stuff going on. And so if you want to fill in your name on there and your email list, we'll make sure to put you on our weekly email that goes out that gives you all kinds of things. After you take stuff out of the innies, just hang on to it, pass the basket on. When the outies come around, that's the one you put stuff back in, including the pens. We're not a church of kleptomaniacs, so please put the pens back when you're done with them. Thank you. Okay, now questions, comments, anybody? Jeremy? Nice to have you back, Grace.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And you too, Jeremy.
Thanks.
It's not as nice as having Grace back, but it's pretty nice.
That's so thoughtful.
No problem.
I had a situation happen, probably way back in my Silver Recovery meeting, and there was a time where you pray about something, and there's a time where you don't pray about something. So what happened was one of our leaders was giving a lesson on forgiveness or something.
Yep.
And what happened was at the end of the meeting, I had shared that my mom needed some prayer for something, like some with her health and all that.
Yeah.
Or at least my dad over. But
She needs to pray for a calmer
yeah,
dog.
I mean, she
calmer
does still
dog.
need prayer, of course. But
Yeah.
the thing is, at the end of the meeting, the leader, one of the other leaders, came up to me and said, "Jeremy, that really hurt what you said."
Yeah.
Because it felt like I stole his thunder from what he was trying to say with his testimony, actually.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn from that mistake, and you think to yourself, "Well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I didn't know if it was a God thing."
Yeah.
You know, so I'm kind of learning now not to say too much, because honesty can get you into trouble also.
It can.
But
It can.
it's still some good things out of it.
Unloving honesty can get you in a lot of trouble, right? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? Clear as mud? Are the baskets through? No, they're still going? Okay. Okay. Why don't you remain seated? We're going to close in a song. Just a couple of things. One, we, following the service, believe it or not, I have to go to a fashion show. I know you can't believe this, but I'm not the model, okay? But I have to go to a fashion show. It makes sense if I explain it, but I don't have time right now. What I would really appreciate, if you could help us by stacking all the chairs in piles of 10, and when we get the back cave out of the way, helping move the couches back or whatever, don't drag them. Get somebody on either side and pick them up and move them back. But if you could help us clean up, that would be absolutely fantastic so we can get out of here on time. The second thing, the Promise Keepers thing, is on February the 6th. It includes breakfast. Every year I take a crew of guys. I need 4 more good men, and I'll take bad men if I have to. Okay, so 4 guys. If you want to come, it's $20, includes breakfast, everything like that. And wives, if your husband wants to go but he doesn't know yet, just talk to me and I'll make sure to hold a spot for him. Okay. The other thing, we had our first 10,000 flyers come in this week. Absolute miracle. We're actually getting them cheaper than we've ever got them. A real answer to prayer. And first 10,000 came in. This year, we're going to send as many flyers out as we have ever, except for our first 2 years. Our first 2 years, we sent 250,000 out. We're not planning on sending 250,000 out. We went from a church of 20 to 200 in 17 months. We do this to help you. We encourage you to bring your friends who don't have a church background, all those kind of things. This is who we're trying to reach continually because there's all kinds of people in people that don't know Jesus. And this is the kind of church they'll sit in, they'll go, they're weird, but I like it. Okay? It's not a real churchy church, it's a neutral territory. There's so many things about this church that are open and that. And so pray as our flyers go out that Jesus would draw people that don't have a church background are going to come here and find him as many of you have. Okay? Because I know many of you came from the flyers and things like that. Why don't you stand? We're going to close in a song. Thank you.
love that's never failing. Let mercy fall on me. And everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of a Savior, the hope of nations. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Take me as you find me, all my fears and failures. Fill my life again. I give my life to follow everything I believe in. And now I surrender. And I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see that we're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see that we're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save. Forever, the author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Sing, shine your light. Shine your light and let the whole world see that we're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see that we're singing for the glory of the risen King. Shine your light and let the whole world see that we're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see that we're singing for the glory of the risen